Okay, let's jump right into this explainer because today we're going to completely flip how you think about the price tag on literally everything you buy. You know, when you see those massive billboards or slick, big budget TV commercials, our first instinct is usually, well, kind of cynical, right? We just assume those millions of rupees spent on marketing are secretly being slapped right onto the price we pay at the register. But what if I told you the math proves the exact opposite is true? To kick things off, let's look at a pretty relatable everyday puzzle. Think about a classic bapuji cake. You can grab one of these at practically any local tapri or corner shop for what, around 8 rupees? Now imagine trying to bake that exact same cake at home. By the time you buy your own flour, the sugar, the baking powder, and actually factor in the electricity for your oven, it is literally impossible to produce it for just 8 rupees. So why on earth is the heavily branded, packaged, and advertised version actually cheaper than your DIY homemade version? Well, the answer lies in a fascinating concept that economists call the advertising paradox. Basically, it's the economic reality that marketing budgets actually lower your final retail price by unlocking mass production efficiencies. So, contrary to popular belief, those flashy ads don't make your babaji cake more expensive. Actually, advertising is the exact mechanism that makes it so incredibly cheap in the first place. So to break down exactly how this counterintuitive concept works, here is our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll cover the advertising paradox. Second, the Roshagala factory model. Third, the engine of scale. Fourth, solving the cash crunch. And finally, the big macro takeaway. All right, let's start with section 1, the advertising paradox, myth versus reality. The absolute foundational mechanic we need to wrap our heads around here is pretty simple. Advertising scales demand. Think of it as the ultimate engine. It takes consumer demand from just one isolated purchase and blows it up to hundreds, thousands, or even millions of units, right? Without advertising, a local business might only see enough foot traffic to sell a handful of items a day. But inject advertising into the mix, and that daily demand just skyrockets. And, as we're about to see, driving up that demand is the ultimate secret to driving down your costs. Moving on to section 2. Let's look at the Rashagola factory model to see this math actually in action. Let's ground all this abstract math into something a bit more delicious, a local Indian sweet shop. Now, before we can even calculate total profits, we have to split our expenses into two very distinct buckets. First up, we have fixed costs. These are your overheads, the expenses that stay exactly the same no matter how much you actually produce. Think of the building rent for our sweet shop. Let's say it's 100 rupees a day. Whether we make one single rashagola or 1,000, the landlord still wants his 100 rupees. Then, on the other side, we have variable costs. These are the operational expenses that scale directly with your production numbers. Stuff like the raw milk, the sugar, the packaging. Let's peg that at about 5 rupees per sweet. Now, watch what happens to these costs as our production scales up. Look at scenario A, our low-volume scenario. If we make just one sweet, it costs us our 100 rupee fixed rent plus 5 rupees for ingredients. That means that one single sweet costs a staggering 105 rupees to make. Ouch. But jump down to scenario C. Let's say our advertising completely takes off, creating huge demand, and we suddenly need to produce 100 sweets. Our rent? Still exactly 100 rupees. Add 500 rupees for the ingredients, and our total cost is now 600 rupees. But here is the magic part. When you divide that 600 by those 100 sweets, your cost per unit absolutely plummets to just 6 rupees. Just look at this visual cliff. This massive drop is the exact reason large, heavily advertised brands can sell their products so cheaply. That fixed cost of rent, or machinery, or salaries is spread out over a massive mountain of items, which totally shrinks the final price tag. Advertising is what generated the massive demand required to make that high volume possible in the first place. So what we just witnessed in that chart is formally known as economies of scale. It's the economic principle stating that as your production volume goes up, the cost to create each individual unit goes down. And getting back to our earlier puzzle, this is exactly why you can't easily bake a commercial cake at home for just 8 rupees. You're stuck operating at volume A, paying premium retail prices for tiny bags of flour. Meanwhile, the big Bapuji cake factory is operating at volume C. They're buying ingredients by the ton at massive bulk discounts and using highly automated processes. All right, section 3, the engine of scale and how those savings actually flow. Let's walk through the first 3 functions here, which show how scaling demand automatically forces down costs across the entire supply chain. Step one, as we've just seen, is that advertising reduces production costs by driving the mass demand needed to optimize manufacturing. Step two, it lowers distribution costs. Think about the logistics. Sending one tiny box across the country is incredibly expensive per item. But if your ads generate enough demand to fill an entire freight train or a massive shipping container, your logistics cost per item shrinks to practically nothing. And that leads to step three. By lowering both production and distribution costs, brands are able to pass these huge savings directly on to you, the consumer, which drastically decreases the final retail prices. Now, the next three functions deal with the broader market dynamics. Step one here is that advertising stimulates market demand. It creates this psychological pull by highlighting aesthetics and utility. Think about jewelry or the latest clothing trends. Step two is that it fosters competition. By forcing different brands to constantly publicly showcase their unique strengths, it prevents monopolies and keeps prices totally fair. And step three is absolutely vital. Advertising educates consumers. It acts as this massive informational pipeline, teaching the public about entirely new product categories. Without ads, how would the general public have ever learned about the benefits of smart TVs or OTG ovens or even fun novelties like color-changing lipsticks? Moving on to Section 4, Solving the Cash Crunch. Let's transition to what is arguably the biggest threat to any new Indian business. Understanding this bottleneck is crucial because any entrepreneur will tell you cash flow is king. So I want you to take a guess. What do you think is the number one thing that kills a new business, creating a severe and often fatal cash crunch? The answer? Blocked capital. This is a nightmare scenario where your hard-earned money is completely tied up in unsold stock, just sitting in some warehouse gathering dust. You've already paid for the raw materials, you've paid your factory workers, you've paid for the packaging. All your liquid cash has been physically transformed into boxes of products. And until those products are actually sold, you have absolutely zero cash on hand to pay your rent, pay your taxes, or frankly, buy groceries for your own family. Unsold stock is literally the enemy of business growth. And this brings us right to the seventh function of advertising, accelerating the business cycle, which we also call increasing cash flow velocity. Basically, advertising acts as a massive rescue operation for that blocked capital. By blasting your product's benefits out to the public, advertising ensures your inventory moves incredibly fast. It goes from production straight to the distributor, to the retailer, and finally into the hands of the consumer. The faster this cycle spins, the faster your tied-up inventory turns back into liquid cash in your bank account, keeping the whole business alive and kicking. And the ripple effects of this healthy business cycle cover our final two functions perfectly. First, it drives national income and employment. When businesses succeed and expand their profit margins, tax revenues naturally increase, which boosts the overall GDP. Plus, it directly fuels thousands and thousands of jobs in marketing agencies, media houses, and film production. Secondly, it forces rapid product quality improvements. Because brands are desperate to stand out in their ad campaigns, they literally have to continuously innovate. Just look at the smartphone market. Brands are constantly one-upping each other, pushing the technology forward simply so they can boast in their next commercial that they have a 100x zoom camera instead of last year's 40-megapixel one. Finally, let's look at Section 5, the macro takeaway. Let's zoom out for a second to see how all of this math directly impacts the everyday Indian household. The ultimate macro takeaway of everything we've talked about today can be summed up in this one powerful statement. Advertising shifts items from being rare luxuries to affordable daily household essentials. By driving consumer education, rapid product innovation, and massive price reductions through economies of scale, advertising literally elevates the entire standard of living. Just think about some of the things around you right now. Household ceiling fans, air conditioners, refrigerators. A few generations ago, these were considered incredibly rare luxuries. They were available only to the absolute wealthiest households. But today, they're totally normalized. They are affordable, standard items found in millions of homes. And that didn't just happen by accident. It happened because advertising generated the massive national demand required to build the giant factories that could pump these items out at a fraction of their original cost. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Look around your home right now. Which everyday essentials, the things you rely on daily without even a second thought, do you only own because advertising and economies of scale successfully drove their prices down? It completely changes how you view the world of commerce, doesn't it? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the math behind the things we buy.